All right. All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming today. Today we have Dr. Brian Nielsen here from Michigan State University. He's a professor of equine exercise physiology and nutrition, and he's going to talk to us today about what he's learned after just a couple of years of experience in the equine industry and research as well.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and I want to thank the Bear Ranch Foundation for supporting this. A couple reasons for it. I love the fact that this is available to people across the world right now. I know I have a friend in Australia who's tuning in, and she can actually let us know today how tomorrow is, since it's already tomorrow there. I also love the fact that I was brought here. I actually have very good friends from like the late 80s who drove 135 miles today. They're not horse people, but they're friends, and they showed up here, and it means an awful lot to me. So with that, I actually, we're going to detail about 33 years of research in equine bone. And I want to give you a little bit of background on how all this started. So 1989, I got a job breaking galloping thoroughbred race horses for a trainer in Minnesota. I have continued on with the whole racing thing. I went off to grad school at Texas A&M, got riding for some trainers down there. Hey, Hank Bird, shout out. I know you're on this. And was doing thoroughbreds and quarter horses, racing quarter horses. And even to this day, I've stuck with the racing industry quite a bit. But I want to go back to that time in Minnesota. The trainer I had was very progressive, and oftentimes while we're riding horses to or back from the track, we'd be talking about bone injuries and how to prevent them, and talking about some of the more recent research that had come out about it, stuff that was published in popular press articles. And one of the main concerns we had was how to prevent buck shins. For those of you not familiar with that, it'd be similar to shin splints in humans, very common problem in horses. Like at the time, about 70% of the 2-year-old thoroughbreds would experience this problem. And it can often result in even bigger problems. But as we went into starting research, when I went off to grad school at Texas A&M, the first project that I was involved with started in October of 1990. And that was, the timing on that was kind of noteworthy, because at that point in the Breeders' Cup to Stuff, there was a breakdown that occurred right in front of the grandstands. Filly by the name of Gopher Wand broke down. Horrific. And lots of pictures published in Sports Illustrated. This is one of the least horrible pictures to see. Some of the other ones were just horrible. It did go ahead. From bad things, sometimes good things happen. It emphasized the need to try and find ways to prevent injuries to these horses, because we can't have that happen. And that first study was looking at feeding a supplement to try and prevent skeletal injuries. I've recently submitted a publication or a manuscript to try and get published. I had hoped it had been out by this time, that has actually detailed every single bone study that we've done, and some of them were nutrition related and all that. I was hoping it had been accepted for publication yet. It hasn't. I kept checking email. So I can't tell you that, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on some of the more practical applications, things that if you're in the horse industry, things that you ought to know. A lot of these things even apply to humans, if you actually care about humans. That first study was interesting from the standpoint we had 53 racing or horses in race training, quarter horses. And it was a pretty rigorous study in that they were scheduled to race every 2 weeks for a total of 9 races or until they were injured. We're not speaking catastrophic injuries, but just having to miss training. And even with humans, 50% injury rate for, people that participate in athletics is common. So that was the type of injuries that we saw. We also, during the study, we looked at what we refer to as RBAEs, which stands for radiographic bone aluminum equivalents. The trick with trying to determine what happens with bone is, how do you measure bone strength? Well, actually, the best way to determine bone strength is to break it. That's not a really good thing to do to your horse. But we can take an x-ray of a horse, have an attached aluminum step wedge penetrometer, which is just various thicknesses of aluminum, and we can compare how light or dark it is to how light or dark it is on the bone, and just do a comparison that way to get an estimate of the amount of bone mineral content. I'm telling you this because when I'm talking about RBAE, that's what I'm talking about, is how much mineral is in that cannon bone, because we're going to use that for a number of different studies. One of the more intriguing things was when we went ahead and plotted that RBAE. This is that line in yellow. And when you, as I move away from the microphone, and I realize that's probably not good for the folks online, from day 0 of the study, when the horses, when we started them in training, it went down. The mineral content of the cannon bone, the lower leg went down, and it stayed low, and then it eventually went back up, and that was a little bit bothersome. If you look at those red bar graphs, those reflect the number of bone-related injuries that horses were having at the time. And you'll notice that at this point in the middle, like between day 60 and 120, that was when the bone mineral content was the least, and that's when we had the most injuries. That was also when we started introducing speed on these horses. Kind of makes sense. The bone has less mineral. It's going to be weaker, and we're starting to do speed, and so you're going to have more injuries. But I was still really bothered by this because most tissues, you put it into training, muscle, it gets stronger. Cardiovascular system, it gets stronger. Why is bone getting weaker? And I remember very vividly when I came up with these results in the lab at night, I was like, I've screwed up. And sometimes in research, you believe you've made a mistake. So I went back and I looked at some radiographs from about, 90 days beforehand, and it went up. It made sense. These were young growing horses. You would expect that. But we were left with this. Why the heck was that happening? Now, in the 1990s, most people only talked bone remodeling. And the idea is you take away mineral to put new mineral back in. And the idea that we were thinking is, well, possibly it's because the tissue wasn't strong enough. And so you have to take some out to put new stuff in to make it even stronger. That was the logic. A concern came up is, as you are losing the mineral, you're not storing it any place, because the place where you store calcium is in bone. But if you're taking it out of there, what happens when you start to gain bone again? Is there an increased need? So these results inspired my PhD work, where we were like, let's see what happens to mineral balance of these horses. So it took 10 horses, did a similar thing, started them under saddle, broke them, and the first 2 months of training, just your nice slow stuff, and then eventually after the month 3 and 4, we started putting speed on them, and we collected urine and feces because research is glamorous. That's the type of stuff you could do, so you could look at mineral balance. By the way, I want to mention that these horses were stalled for 19 days prior to the onset of this, and there was logic for that because these were unbroke horses, and for doing total collections, they have to stand tied for 3 days. Well, we have an inner tube suspended underneath them to collect the urine, and you have to walk behind them and scoop up their feces. And if you want to get your head kicked in, that's a good way to do it. So let's get a little bit of, getting them used to being handled. We saw a very similar curve. We saw that drop in the mineral content of the cannon bone, and then it went back up, and I was like, okay, well, that's kind of a cool thing. That matches up with what we saw. So we decided to do this again, but now feeding what the NRC required or more. So a little bit extra to see if maybe that extra mineral will help reduce the amount of mineral lost, or maybe help it gain faster. And I was beginning to get a little bit suspicious that maybe that bone loss that we were seeing was because we were sticking these horses in stalls. So we reduced that adaptation period to only 9 days. We actually also walked them 2 hours per day, an hour in the morning, hour in the evening on mechanical walker, just to keep some exercise. And then we did things very similar. And you know what? Looking at mineral balance, the purple line was the ones that we fed higher minerals. They retained a little bit more mineral. That time it's positive. And then we looked at what happened with that total RBAE. This is the mineral content. We didn't see that big drop that we had seen prior. Maybe a little bit of an advantage with a higher mineral one. But it goes back to this question, what is causing bone loss? And we were beginning to put some clues together. And was it due to the stalling of horses? I was really lucky that when I was in grad school, one of the guys whose research we used to talk about when we were out galloping racehorses, he gave a seminar. And I threw out that idea to him. I said, do you think it has something to do with the idea that we are putting these horses in stalls and that's causing the bone loss? And he said, horses out on pasture don't run enough to make a difference. I'm like, okay, I'm the Peon grad student. You are the guru. We'll wait and see. At the same point, I had a person on my graduate committee. Shout out to Dr. Sue Bloomfield. She's now retired, but she's an amazing, yeah, I see Amanda's nodding. She knew nothing about horses. She did not know that you had to break horses to ride them. She thought you could just go out to any horse in the pasture, throw a saddle on it, and you're going to be great. No. But what she did know is how bone responds to mechanical loading. She worked a lot with human bed rest patients, and I threw this idea out to her, and she says, well, of course, it only makes sense. Temple Grandin was at MSU earlier this week lecturing, and she was talking about, I think she worded it as, when bad becomes normal. And if you're just used to seeing something one way, you just think that's normal. And in the horse industry, we put horses in stalls, so it's normal. But maybe it's not good. And it really took that lady who knew nothing about horses to say, no, I don't think that is good. So when I got to MSU, this was 1996, I had to give a presentation in the physiology seminar. There was an older faculty member who was in there, and I had a paper that I was ready to write, and I wanted to give a talk on it. And it was what we had seen and what we were thinking maybe was causing this. And afterwards, he says, I wouldn't publish this. All righty. That paper's now been cited 89 times. And it's kind of changed the ways that we've thought about it. So younger people, if you have some old crotchety person who says, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. Sometimes you got to be bold enough to say, I'm going to ignore you. So let's talk about how sometimes these common things that we've seen for years may or may not be right. So we can go back to like 1972 and people are talking about how months of slow training will increase bone strength. And if you talk to people in the horse industry, they'll often say that, just walking, trotting, a lot of slow work, that's just really good to make strong bone. We're going to find out maybe it doesn't do anything. I think that stuff is really good for the mind of the horse, and you can never pass that. You have to look at all factors. But if you think you're making strong bone, maybe by the end of this, you might realize that's not the case. By contrast, 1993 at our Equine Nutrition and Physiology Symposium, Dr. Garrett Brown gave a seminar, and he was talking about how he was involved with a study where they took weanling horses and put them in training. Now, over in Europe especially, you're a horrible person if you train horses young, or so that's the general belief. So putting weanlings in training, what a horrible person. And the training was sprinting them across concrete. Okay, mad scientist. Now keep in mind it had actually a few centimeters of sand on there, so there's a little something there. When these horses entered real training, like being ridden as 3-year-olds, and they were comparing them to a cohort group that had never went through the training, they actually had a decreased incidence of osteochondrosis. For those of you not familiar, that's a defect in cartilage. Who would have thought sprinting really young horses over concrete in a very short, probably like the length of this room, might actually be beneficial. If you understand bone physiology, it makes sense. There's what we refer to as Wolff's Law. Basically, the idea is bone responds to whatever forces you place on it. If you bend it, it becomes stronger. If you don't bend it, it becomes weaker. And we often say use it or lose it. And the idea is bone has what we often talk about, this optimal strain environment that it wants to be in. If bone doesn't bend enough, it says, I'm too strong. Let's get rid of some of that. If it bends too much, the bone says, we're too weak. Let's make it stronger. Bone is always trying to become adapted to whatever strains it's experiencing. And you might say, why would you want skeleton to become weaker? You could take the legs of a draft horse, put them on a racehorse, and those legs probably would not break. I don't know how you're going to do that. Maybe somebody in this room is a lot smarter than me, but if you could do it, evolution says that's a bad idea because you are going to get eaten. because you are now going to be slower because it's energetically inefficient to carry that extra leg weight around. So that's why bone is always adapting to whatever strain it's experiencing. Now, let's start talking about some more of these studies. A study published in 1988 talked about a marker of bone formation, osteocalcin. A lot of us use it. And they saw that when you transfer foals from pasture to stalls, you have a decrease in osteocalcin. Again, marker of bone formation. That's a clue that moving into stalls might not be a good thing. But there's more to the story than that. We did a study looking at from the first day of life till 2 years of age, young horses, and looking at osteocalcin. And what was really interesting, looking at that osteocalcin concentration at day 0, it's like 67 nanograms per mil. 2 weeks later, it had jumped up to almost double that, and then it gradually declined. Couple points. One, as bone growth slows down, osteocalcin is going to go down, and as you get older, bone growth goes down. So maybe transferring them from pasture to stalls had something to do with them getting older. But I want to go back and talk about this one a little bit more. It's interesting that on day 0 of life, it was about half of what it was 2 weeks later. When that baby is riding around in mom, it's not pounding the pavement. Okay, so it's not loading the skeleton. By 2 weeks of life, it's been born, it's running around, it's playing, it's loading the skeleton. Osteocalcin is going to jump up. Another clue that you need to pound the pavement to make bone stronger. At the same time, there are other studies being done on other animal species, looking at, for instance, chickens, where when you house them in battery cages, the wing strength isn't as strong. Pigs, you keep them in confinement housing, the skeleton's not as strong. So it makes sense the same things would be happening with horses. And that first study I did at Michigan State was to go ahead and answer that question. The question that guru, and I still have a lot of respect for him, he's a great guy, he did a lot to advance it, who said horses don't run around enough to make a difference. I'm like, I'm going to find out when I have my own research program. And so we took a group of long yearlings that all been raised on pasture. We put half of them in stalls, walked them an hour per day on a mechanical walker, so they got some exercise. And the others we kept out on pasture. And the grad student that I was working with, she felt like she didn't get enough horse handling experience in undergrad, and she says, "Do you think we could break them at some point?" And I'm like, "That's what I do, babe." So let's do it. I got permission to go ahead. And the last couple months of the study, we went ahead and broke all these horses. And here's kind of the thing. Yellow line, horses out on pasture. The kind of bluish line, horses in stalls. That very first month, from when we started the study to our first set of radiographs after they started, it had dropped down. This is that mineral content of the cannon bone. And it stayed low. And that dotted line, day 84, that's when we started these horses in training. Just your typical slow stuff, walking, trotting, cantering. Even that wasn't enough to make it go up. Folks, let's talk about it from the industry standpoint. I've been preaching for years. I actually feel bad for the trainers that get the best thoroughbreds, the really high dollar ones, the ones that people are paying 6 figures for, 7 figures for, that have the best genetics. I feel bad for those trainers. I want those horses. But where I feel bad for them is those horses, a lot of them have been handled completely wrong. They've been sale prepped and babied. The industry's figuring this out. They're changing the deal. This would be an example. If you sale prepped a baby, you put it in a stall so it doesn't get sun bleach, it doesn't get scars on it. You hand walk it for 3 months before it goes through the sale at Keeneland, and somebody buys it for $2 million. And then you start it in training and you're riding it very slow for the first 2 months. And then you start to introduce speed on it and it breaks down on you. The answer is because its skeleton was stronger way before you ever started handling it. Because by bringing it into a stall, we made the skeleton weaker. Next question we asked, and part of why I love this story of what's happened over the past 3 decades plus, is you can see how research evolves and how it goes from one step to the next step, and it's directions you don't necessarily know. Like, could I have ever predicted when I started out where we would end up? No, it's a fun little journey. But the next step was, okay, we get it, 24/7, out on pasture, that's better than stuck in a stall. Is half a day good enough? And so we did that with a group of weanlings. Half or, a third of them or so stalled, third of them out on pasture, the other 12 hours in, 12 hours out, tracked them for 2 months. And I could show you a couple different views. For time's sake, I'm just showing you one of them. In all views, we ended up with the stalled group, the yellow one lower. Different views, the two partial pasture, complete pasture, it's swapped. The point is you don't have to be out all the time. Even 12 hours a day was good enough. Now, what was fun is we returned those horses to pasture. And then a year later, it was like, I wonder what's happened. Can they recover from that? Look at this. So that scatter of data at the front end, yeah, that was what we were seeing with 2 months, and we saw these treatment differences. A year later, after they've all been turned back out to pasture, that is a pretty tight little mean. They're all the same. The good part is if you need to stall them initially, you haven't ruined your animal for life. We don't know how long you can do that before you have messed them up, but at least, thankfully, a little bit, you're able to recover. Now, I was talking about a lot of this stuff in, I think it was like 1998. I was over in Northern Ireland giving lectures for a couple of weeks. This gentleman right here on horse number 7, David Christie, great individual. He was the farm manager at the university that I was speaking at, and we became fast friends. He put me on a lot of good racehorses while I was over there. It was awesome. And it was giving a lecture, and he was in the back of the room, and I could see the look on his face. It was like, something's not right, because I was talking about the buck shins and the fact that it primarily happens in 2-year-olds. And I'm like, okay, David, something's not right. What's the deal? And he's like, over here, we have our national hunt horses that they're bucking their shins as 5-year-olds. I'm like, holy cow, that makes no sense to me. Let's talk a little bit. He explained how these horses were handled when they were weaned in the fall. The babies were tossed in the stalls, and they were kept in stalls all winter long because over there it's rainy and they don't want to tear up the pastures. And then they often don't even start their horses until later on in life. And when I was over there, he put me on a horse in a bumper race. It's for horses that have never raced before. I guess that's how they get the name bumper race. And he's like, be very careful on this horse, Brian. He's really young. He's only 5. I think most of my horses are retired by 5. But it told me that's the idea is you don't start them until late. When you don't do that, it doesn't surprise me that we're having these problems because they were handled wrong when they were babies, and we keep up the wrong management, and they're never stressed. This individual off on the side, she became a good friend. She was actually she provided the nutritional advice to Sheikh Mohammed, the ruler of Dubai. And I was told by some friends in Ireland she wanted to talk. She'd been following our research. I'm like, oh yes, my connection to Sheikh Mohammed. Thinking I'm going to have a golden palace someday. Anyway, and so I called her up and we were talking about the buck shins, and she said the incident rate over there is much worse. And it only took a few minutes of talking to understand why it was worse. They were taking their horses. It's so stinking hot over there. And these horses are doing nothing but living in air conditioning stalls for long periods of time. Great way to go ahead and do it. Sadly, she was in South Africa and was murdered at one point, so she's no longer with us, which is actually really sad when you pull up Facebook and you see a friend was killed. But it does explain how if you manage things wrong, you can mess up horses pretty easily. So now the next big question as we go step by step on all this is, okay, we've seen having horses out in pasture is good. Sticking completely in stalls is bad. There's lots of other factors that go into it. Is it sunlight? Is it nutrition? Because there's all these different confounding factors. Let's isolate it. Is it exercise? And so we used a calf model because people are much less bothered by sacrificing calves, and we can actually look at bone strength, which is the holy grail, by doing some bone breaking. We had our group house individuals. We have those that were confined with no exercise, basically like calf hutch type size. And then we also have those that were confined with exercise, 50-meter sprints 5 times per week. Yes, they sprint so fast. Look at that. That's just, I know you all want to breed racing animals. 42 days, and then at the end of that, we sacrificed these animals. Felt good that we could actually use the meat of that. So I I'm less bothered if they're going for a good use. Computed tomography, CAT scans, 3-point bending tests of the bone. I could bore you with lots and lots of stuff, but let's talk about these 3-point bending tests. Our exercise group, 5,560 newtons. Let's talk confined, 4,746. That's a pretty big drop there. The group house was in a middle. They didn't exercise a lot on their own. We had cameras on them. Behavior matters. And other calves and other group house things played a lot more than ours did. So just because you're giving an animal access to exercise and the right type of exercise does not guarantee it does. Keep that in mind. But that was kind of neat that it was that little bit. And I have so much data I could share with you. And I always don't want to bore trainers. And a way to bore a trainer is give them lots of numbers. But I can show them a picture. So this is the cross section of the cannon bone. Our confined group versus the exercise group. You show that to a trainer, they get it. That little bit of exercise, 50-meter sprints, 5 days per week for 6 weeks, made that kind of difference. What about on horses? Because you're talking to horse people are nuts. Sorry to all the horse people out there, but you all know it's the truth. And if it's done in calves, it doesn't apply to horses. So we did kind of replicate this. We had a little bit longer sprint area because we just had an alleyway we could turn them loose and catch pen at the end. So 82 meters, 5 days a week, again, looking at about 8 weeks there. And the real quick story on that is the exercise group in red, it had went up. Doesn't surprise us. And again, we could bore you with lots of other things regarding how did the cross-sectional area, the geometry of that bone change, the dorsal cortex, the front of the bone, it increased in size, the medial cortex, the inside of the bone increased in size, the medullary cavity, the whole decreased in size. That explains why actually it's probably going to be stronger. The next thing, okay, it's 5 days per week. That's not always practical. Can you get by with less? Do you need 5? Would 3 work? Does 1 work? And a little bit longer alleyway that we had here, 71 meters, because we just adapt to whatever we have. The staff was actually hoofing it quite a bit. We'll keep that one around for racing. And here is the thing. 0 days per week, 6,300 newtons. Just 1 day per week, 7,900. This was a 26% difference in bone strength with one little 71-meter sprint per week. Holy cow. So little means so much. If you've gone to your local high school or college track, about a quarter of a mile, if we calculate that out, that 1 day per week, 71 meters, 6 weeks on the study, that's about 426 meters. That's about 1 lap over a month and a half, making a 26% difference in bone strength. Folks, speed matters. Some take-home points from this. First of all, bone needs to be stressed to be strong. I guarantee you it needs to be stressed to be strong. And you can make the biggest changes when young. You can't make those changes when old. Bone modeling. Bone modeling primarily happens in that growing animal. And it is the process by which you can change the shape, the process by why you can add or take away mineral. I want to talk about shape, and does shape matter? It does. And bone will change its shape depending upon whether it's stressed or not. Take a cardboard tube, squeeze it, and try and bend it that way. It's more resistant to it, much more easy to bend this way. Have you changed how much cardboard is there? No. But have you changed the shape? Yes, more resistant to bend, less resistance to bend. It's the moment of inertia. That can only happen when that animal is growing and bone modeling is going on, as opposed to bone remodeling, which is you take it away, you fix some damage. It's like repairing a pothole, as opposed to building a new road. Building a new road is much easier in that growing animal. There is a need for speed, but if you do too much without time for it to repair, it can break. Think about paper clips. I keep lots of them in my office because when I'm talking on the phone, I fidget, and they always break. It's called stress hardening. Bone works that way, but unlike the mineral, or unlike the metal in the paper clip, bone actually can repair itself if you allow enough time. So if you're messing up, give it some time and it will repair itself. If you don't give it time, then bad things happen. So let's go back to this common belief as to whether slow stuff is good. Again, it is great for the mind. I love it. I do lots. I trail riding and stuff for race order, all kinds of slow stuff, great for the mind. But is it actually improving bone? We did a study where we had a group of 2-year-olds in simulated endurance training, where these horses were 162 days in training, and by 90 days in, they were doing 60-kilometer exercise bouts on a treadmill every 3 weeks. These horses were fit because they were doing lots of miles on a treadmill to get them really fit. And we had taken radiographs of them before the study and then after the study, and we compared them to pasture mates. You know, we didn't need all the 2-year-olds from that year, so we had some that weren't on there, and we compared them. There was no difference. So miles and miles and miles and miles of slow training, no difference. What's really interesting, and I'm going to repeat again, no difference, because I'm almost going to break a cardinal rule regarding, some of you scientists will understand this. The endurance trained horses were in blue, pasture trained horses were in green. Lots of variation there. That's why there's no difference. But I was like, it's looking like if we had more horses, did the study longer, we might find that the ones who were not in training had stronger bone. And there's logic to that. I've done a few marathons in my life, and do I feel, sprightly and I want to play it on? No, I feel really tired when I'm done training. These horses, when you turn them out at night, did they run and play and kick around? No, they were tired. They ate, they drank, and they slept. They're pasture mates, young horses. What do young horses do? They play. Do they run around all the time? No. If you watch them over a 24-hour period, do you see them occasionally take a quick burst of speed? Yeah. That is all you may need. Some of our research made the cover of Quarter Horse Journal 2-3 years ago, and I like this take-home point. Good bones. Sprinting builds bone mass. People think of speed as being this horrible thing. It can be, but without speed, you will not have a strong skeleton because you have to stress it because the bone responds to it to become stronger. I think it was in 2005, I was asked to speak in Hanover, Germany. There was a big equine nutrition conference going on, and there was a lot of folks that have been using some of these markers of bone metabolism, some that I've talked about earlier, like osteocalcin, which is a marker of bone formation, OC. We had a few markers of bone resorption that we were talking about, DPD, ICTP. Here I've highlighted bone quality, so that's if we're doing radiographs or CT. And anyway, the folks over there said, we have a lot of people that are using these markers of bone formation in nutrition studies, and we don't think they work because we're never finding any treatment differences. Can you come over here and give us your thoughts on it? And so I put together a lot of our nutrition studies where we had done these, used these at the time. And truthfully, that's what I saw. The no's mean no treatment difference. T means, there was a trend, meaning, maybe if we had a few more horses. Yes means there was a treatment difference. The silicon one, and we've done lots of silicon work, and we don't have time to bore you with all that stuff here, but there were some differences there. But for the most part, what we saw is the same thing, which is, these nutritional studies where we tweak nutrition wasn't really making a difference in terms of the bone marker. But I decided, let's go back to all of our exercise studies. What do you see a lot of? Yes, 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 yes. Yeah. So for my nutritionist friends out there, Nirada, I'm looking at you. I want you to realize this does not mean, she's the Australian person who I saw was tuned in. This does not mean nutrition isn't important. That is not the take-home message. It absolutely is. But once you have nutrition right, you can't make it any, that's taken care of. But you cannot make strong bone without the right exercise. Dr. Shea-Poor did some work with David Kronfeld, where they had horses, they were tracking bone strength on one study, and then there was a period where the horses weren't on a study and they were installed for a while, and then they started a new study and took radiographs, and they'd seen a drop in it, despite feeding twice what the NRC recommended in calcium. So just taking in extra mineral does nothing. They lost bone mass despite receiving tons of extra. Good nutrition without the right exercise program, it doesn't work. It doesn't, because bone responds to whatever forces are being applied to it. So 2 years ago, yes, 2021, former grad student of mine, Alyssa Logan, and I, we put together this paper. Let's talk a little bit about false beliefs. A few years back, Justify won the Triple Crown without having raced as a 2-year-old. And so it's fun to want to monitor social media and all these people who say, oh, yes, you know, this is why you shouldn't race horses as 2-year-olds, because they didn't race him as a 2-year-old and he won the Triple Crown. Okay, they're ignoring some important facts. There was what was referred to as the Apollo curse. And if I recall right, Apollo was the last horse to win the Kentucky Derby without having raced in as a 2-year-old. And I think it was like in 1885 or something like that. So all those years, nobody else had ever won the Kentucky Derby without having raced as a 2-year-old. Which, by the way, you can't win the Triple Crown without having won the Kentucky Derby. So if you do a little math, this argument as to not having raced as a 2-year-old is the right way to go, it doesn't match up. But it promoted this argument that people have like, oh, you shouldn't race them as young horses. So I don't get in arguments on social media because it's not worth it. But we did this post, said, here, we published this paper where we discussed this idea of training young, whether it's good or bad, whatever. We made it open access. And, you know, I was very pleasantly surprised by the response. It was very favorably received. 771 shares. I checked a couple days ago. The article's been read like over 19,000 times. I'm glad that some people have embraced it because there is a lot of truth to it. But I want to give you some more examples. Open knees versus closed knees. If you talk to your average person in the horse industry, they will tell you it's a bad thing to train a horse before its knees are closed. For those of you, I like the laughter, that's good. Here's the deal, is you're looking at the growth plates and whether they've closed, whether the animal is pretty much done growing. And that's always been the belief that, yes, you don't want to train them before they're done growing until they're skeletally mature because it's bad for them. That's been what they have argued. So this study, published in 1972, Australian Vet Journal, here were the results. They had a group of 2-year-olds that they had put into training. The horses either had open knees, intermediate, or closed knees. The ones with open knees, 77% remain sound. Whereas the ones with intermediate or closed, only like 55% remain sound. It looks a lot better. There's reasons why these results could have been the way they were. It could have been, well, every good trainer knows you don't train them hard if their knees are open. And so maybe those trainers, if they knew the knees were open, didn't train them as hard. That could be the reason. I would buy that. Let's take a look at what the authors wrote. I hate lots of words on a slide, so I will read these for you. They said, I'm quoting, many horses with open epiphysis race 6 or more times and remain sound. Okay, I'm going to review that again. Many horses with open epiphysis race 6 or more times and remain sound, while numerous horses with closed epiphysis became unsound before their first race or before completing 6 races. I guess my logic that I threw out at you didn't work. They then went on to say, it is possible that in these horses, closures of epiphysis occurs prematurely due perhaps to some nutritional factors which cause a generalized skeletal dystrophy. You want the truth! You can't handle the truth! See how many of you still awake? They had the truth. That actually is better. Yeah. But it was 1972. In the late 90s, we were still talking about bone remodeling. Nobody talked bone modeling except pure bone physiologists. I get it why they didn't think this would make sense at all, because this is what we are all told to believe. We are now in 2023. We should know about bone modeling. We should know. I'm going back to that young horse thing. Olympics. Do you tell our Olympic athletes, not speaking human in equestrian games, because most of those people are old, but the deal is you look at most of your Olympic athletes, when have they started training for the Olympics? When they're young, really young. Now, there's lots of injury rates that go along with that, but the point is we don't ask our human athletes, do we tell our kids, do not play sports in middle school or high school? No, you should be sedentary and do nothing. No, that doesn't make any sense. But our horse community seems to believe that's the case. Though science, going back to 1972, if we want to believe science, tells you the opposite. A few closing points here. And we've been talking about bone, but I want to emphasize some cartilage stuff for a reason. And we could spend hours talking about this too. The wrong type of exercise damages cartilage. And this is some of the current stuff that we're working on using even some of our sheep models. Yay, go sheep. The deal is, look at this picture of those runners. And this is an issue with circular exercise. When you go ahead and you are performing on a circle and that foot hits the ground, you get uneven loading of the joint. Suddenly all the force is focused on one part of the joint instead of spread evenly. Folks, you and I, those of you who are in the horse industry, know we do a lot of circular stuff. Lunging. People lunge their horses to death. And then we wonder why there's joint issues in so many disciplines, so many horses, and we think about what we've done to those joints. And then we try some magic cure, most of which doesn't work. Whole nother topic, a whole different time. But like all these joint supplements there's a lot of people making money on stuff that doesn't work. I'll just go with that. But I also want to bring up a little bit of a story. This goes back to 1990. One of the trainers that I was riding for in Minnesota, great individual. And what was unique about him is he was a dentist as well as a thoroughbred trainer. I'm like, wow, you are a busy individual. And we had this horse that was owned by a veterinarian who was cheap. I respect that. I am too. But what he would do is he would lunge his horses to get them in shape in the spring instead of sending them to us to work on the track. And if you think about trying to get a thoroughbred racehorse in shape by lunging, you're probably going fast and lots of it. And his horses would come in with big ankles, not surprising. And I remember the day very vividly. I think it was a Wednesday when he told me, he's like, she's never going to get anything done. I've injected her ankles, corticosteroids. And he's like, we're just going to race her a little bit, see what happens. A few days later, she sets pari-mutuel history at Canterbury Downs. For a $2 bet, she paid $152.40. And no, I didn't bet on her. Ironically, after I turned over to the pony horse that night, I went back to the trainer. I said, man, if she can run as half as good as she thinks she can, she's going to be deadly tonight. Should have put $2 on her. But what that told me is that, wow, corticosteroids, you take away the pain, the inflammation, and they don't know there's a problem. We raced her one more time. She ran non-winners of 2. She finished second, and he said, that's it. We are done. Because he, with his medical background, being a dentist, he knew that you have not cured the problem. You have hidden it. And that's not a good thing. I'm going to go back to 2008. Sadly, injuries still occur. And if you remember the Kentucky Derby that year, after Big Brown won, the horse that finished second, 8 Bells, she broke both legs, both ankles after she crossed the finish line. And there was a lot of discussion that year regarding anabolic steroids, and the press, the media was like, oh, anabolic steroids, because she was a big mare. And mares don't typically, they're not competitive against the boys. So the fact she ran second in the Kentucky Derby, they're figuring, wow, she must have been given anabolic steroids. And then there was issues with the horse that won the race. I won't bore you with all that deal. And it was irritating me because I'm like, folks, you're worried about the wrong steroid. You need to worry about the other steroid, and it's corticosteroids, because I know what happens out there. People have a problem. They inject the ankles. They inject the knees because there's a problem. And it looks like that animal is cured. And it isn't. You cannot fix a joint in 3 days. You've just hidden the problem. And the horse doesn't know. And the trainer doesn't think about it. And the veterinarians look like superheroes. And I'm certain there are jockeys that have died when the horse breaks down because somebody hid the problem. That was the steroid that should have been addressed. This problem existed. And there was problems, and some of you in the horse industry know about all the issues that were happening out at Santa Anita and the breakdowns. And here was kind of a neat thing I pulled up, and that was like in 2019 that was a really bad year. Another quote for you that I will give, this was from the Pollock report in 2020. It goes, beginning in March 2019, restrictions on intra-articular injections of corticosteroids were part of those agreements with California tracks Santa Anita and Del Mar, which dramatically reduced catastrophic injuries, racing to the point where there were no dirt track breakdowns throughout the entire meeting, had a 30-day cutoff before races on fetlock joint corticosteroid injections and 10 days before workouts. Here's the take-home point. The reduction in catastrophic injuries since the new rules went into effect demonstrated this was a real problem. Yeah, been preaching that since 2008. And the problem still exists out there, but when you hide injuries. I'm going to finish this up with one last story. My major professor in grad school, Dr. Gary Potter, he quotes how he was interviewing an old trainer, racehorse trainer once, and he said, so what do you think is your number one cause of injuries to your horses? And the old trainer thought about it for a while and then said, respiratory problems, which on the surface doesn't seem to make any sense. So he asked for more details. He's like, well, I can't explain why, but it seems like every time I have a horse that's laid up for a bit because it's, has some coughing or whatever, when I put it back in training, it gets injured. Oh yeah, it all makes sense now. The deal is you need that stress. When you don't have it, bone gets weaker. And then when we start to have injuries, what you don't want to do is you don't want to hide those injuries. I'm not a fan of pain, but pain tells you don't do that. If you keep these things in mind, folks, you can avoid a lot of our injuries. With that, I thank you for your time. So. And we do have time for questions. Go for it.
At what age is it too late for speed training to promote bone growth?
Good question. Her question was, at what age is it too late to promote bone growth? Ironically, the answer I will give you is that it's probably when they're done growing. And there's folks that have been doing a lot of work with tendon, and there's a lab over in the UK, and they've shown that if you've not adapted that tendon by the time they're a yearling, it's too late. My gut reaction is it's probably somewhat similar with bone, because your chance to make the biggest changes is when that animal is actively growing. I'll give you a fun little deal. This was a paper, I can't tell you the year it was published, but I remember reading it when I was in grad school, and there was a survey of young women and looking at all the factors that affected bone mass. And they looked at everything from nutrition, soda pop consumption, I can go on and on. The only thing that was linked to bone mass was that activity level of the gals when they were young. So the ones who were going out to races and playing hard and playing sports, they had more bone mass than the ones that didn't. Which, for my students, I always preach, college students, they're 19, 20, 21, they're running out of time. Because, humans, you reach bone mass in your early 20s, and then it's a downhill slide. And, it's like, go out and do something right now. But more importantly, if you have kids, have your kids do stuff so they're building up as much bone mass as possible. So then when you start the downhill slide, it takes you longer to get to the danger point. So that's kind of a human horse comparison, but I would say, man, I would try to have as much of it. The other problem is, and we don't know the correct answer to this yet, what happens when you lose it? So a mature horse, it's stalled for a period of time. Is it totally in trouble? Can you get it back? NASA has done a lot of research in bone because of the problem with space flight and losing bone mass when you're there. You get detectable bone loss in space flight after only 3 days. Now, absolutely no gravity, or compared to just sitting in a stall doing nothing, that's different. But it's a scary thing to consider. So I love having horses on pasture. They don't all run. I had some racehorses that were absolutely lazy, and you call them up and they're like, I'll get there. And then I have those that run, and I love it. I'm one of those weird people at night, the windows open. I love hearing my horses blast across the pasture. It's like, I'm a bone guy. That makes me happy. But you think about all the horses. Again, you look at our racehorse industry, but this applies to other industries too. We stall them, and they don't get that. And then if you ever turn them loose, you have to be scared because they're going to run around and get themselves injured. If we can, and I always challenge people, I can't give you the directions on how to manage your horses. I can let you know the factors you need to consider, because I don't want to be responsible when you turn your horse loose after you've cooped him up for a week and he runs into a fence and dies. Because those are factors you need to consider. The best situation is to never lose that bone mass to begin with. It just tells me I'm done. The deal is even myself as a runner, if I have periods where I'm not running as much, I have to be careful getting back into it. And the problem is whether it's horses, whether it's humans, you gain cardiovascular fitness a lot faster than your bone get stronger again. And if you ramp it up way too quickly, you got a problem. Once you're fit and your bone is adapted to it, speed's not an issue. Do as much as you want from the standpoint of bone. It's just when you let it get weak again. There was a lot in there, but yeah, others.
Does surface impact this?
Yes, yes. And there's so much to be, so if you want to grant me a lot of money, we'll explore all of those things. Let's go back to the calf studies. Those were done on a concrete surface, just because those were the alleyways we had available. And that probably produces a greater response than if it was on a sand surface. However, they also go a lot slower. So, it's not an ideal model. It's funny how people really promote like use of mice and rats. And if you want to get federal funding, use mice and rats, which really is a long ways away from a horse. A calf is closer and, a little bit similar structure, but there are some differences with that. Certainly. And let's talk some more about surfaces. And Santa Anita was crucified for their training surface. And if you paid attention to this whole thing, everybody was saying, oh, it's your racetrack surface that's causing the issue. And I'm sitting back there in Michigan laughing, because I used to race at Mount Pleasant Meadow. I love this track. It was a sweet little county fair track, and the surface was not amazing. And I remember visiting with the race stewards, and they're like, yeah, we don't remember ever carting a horse off. There was never a breakdown on there. And maybe it's because, listen to the sarcasm or the tone, it's because the horses at Mount Pleasant didn't get the great veterinary care that the horses at Santa Anita were receiving, and that great veterinary care might be injecting the joints and doing the things to hide the injuries. I guarantee you the racetrack surface at Santa Anita was much better, but it's hard to convince people of these other factors. But even like the synthetics, and this was a big thing for a while, and it changed the injury type. The one advantage with synthetic surfaces, and for those of you who don't know what a synthetic is, if you empty your vacuum cleaner bag, it looks like that. It's like plastic fibers and all this stuff. It's just whatever. It's kind of neat. Different loading goes along with it. But the one cool thing about it, it is such that you can actually bank the curves more, and that's a good thing from like the joint health issues. For the tracks that opted to take advantage of that, that was a beneficial thing. But they discovered they were probably having more soft tissue type of injuries. Injuries are always going to be part of athletic training, whether it's human. I did some treadmill work yesterday. I was limping a little today. Bad shoes, whatever. Oh, that just hurt. The deal is, it's all part of the game, moderating it, and I'd never take anything to hide pain because I want to know, because I'm like, I'm not going to do it again today. And so many of our things, if we just pay attention, we can avoid it if we let things get, and rest is a great thing to recover, but rest can be the opposite there are people who talk about we need to give our racehorses these rest, these long periods of time off. I'm not opposed to that if they're out on pasture, can run and play, and you put them in a stall. That's the worst thing. They might fix that injury, and you've made them more susceptible to others. Yeah, but surface, because it's all about loading. And yeah, but you also get adapted to whatever load you're placing on it. Fire away.
So that drop in mineral content could be related to like exposure to sun or vitamin D or something like that.
So that was one of the original thoughts, and that's why we had to go back and just look at exercise by itself, because you're right, there are so many confounding factors. The question for the audience online is that drop in mineral, could it be caused by like lack of sun exposure, vitamin D, things like that? We did some vitamin D work that was interesting. We haven't published it. We presented it at, I don't recall what meeting, a few years ago. We just actually had a guy who thought, oh, you live in Michigan and it's cloudy and winters, and so probably not enough sun exposure. And so we just used my own personal horses just to get a rough idea, some preliminary stuff, looking at vitamin D, both summer and winter, and it really didn't seem to have any difference. And the other thing that was interesting about it is, and this is, if I had enough time to publish everything that I've done, I mean, I'm hoping to get it all done before retiring. I have a goal. But it actually looks like the guy who sponsored the research, he was all excited because he's like, oh, this means all horses need it. I was actually like, I think the interpretation is this life's like no horses need vitamin D added to their DL. This is how it could be interpreted because we didn't see those seasonal differences. And actually, I believe rhinos and elephants also, they don't need it. They don't have the sun exposure issue. It's a whole different game. But vitamins is a whole nother level that I don't want to become an expert in. But there are so many factors on pasture versus in a stall. And even like I've quit breaking horses in stalls, like just getting sidetracked now, but I love breaking babies. It's fun. We had a big discussion regarding how our horses to break it kept in stalls versus out on pasture. And we had two sides to the story. And I didn't know which way to go. The ones in stalls that are seeing humans every day and getting handled more. The other ones out on pasture, maybe whatever. Huge difference. First day of training, they were all pretty similar. Day two, the horse out on pasture, they're like old cow ponies. I mean, really, we go out to this, throw the saddle on, whatever, climb on, no running around. The difference, we had an animal behaviorist who believed, oh, it's because the animal's out on pasture, they learn to adapt with struggle. I'm like, no, it's like kids. Why do we have races? Get all the, so they sit and concentrate a little bit. The horses in stalls, they just had extra energy they need to get rid of. So from that standpoint, I love having babies out on pasture for breaking. Why deal with all that extra hassle? It's not good for me. It's not good for them. So there are these other factors that go into being out on pasture. I love being out on pasture, but it really, we were able to narrow it down by some of those where we just isolated, is it exercise versus the group housing on pasture? It's the exercise. But just being on pasture doesn't mean they will run around. I'm keeping an eye on the time. We did publish a fun paper, I think last year, end of last year. We were trying to categorize horse movement out on pasture as it related to weather, thinking, oh, you know, there's a couple of really interesting things beyond that. We used my horses and we used horses a few miles away. So receiving very similar weather. The funny part is I had a 33-year-old, I don't know what the heck the breed is, like spotted American horse something, I don't know. She's a cute little thing that had been given to me and my kids rode her, and she had Cushings and long hair. She was adorably sweet, not bred for racing, but she was housed with all my other horses, which were race horses. And so when they're running around just because that's what they were bred for, this sweet little girl, she's just out there powering along with them despite being 33 years old, Cushing and all these things. She worked way more than young horses just a few miles away that weren't housed with it. So there's that stimulation that goes along with it too. But just being out on pasture doesn't guarantee they will run. The real question is, are they sprinting? And you don't need much. The final note, unless I'll stick around forever. I have nothing better to do. I love talking about bone. My students, I'll ask them how much time do you think a horse needs to be out on pasture to benefit bone? And they'll start throwing out, well, 12 hours, 10 hours, 5 hours. I was like 5 seconds. You have a horse that you have cooped up in a stall. You turn them out. What are they going to typically do? Especially if it's young athletic, they run. And in that 5 seconds, they probably covered 50, 60, 70 meters. You're good. That's all you need. Good luck trying to catch that horse after 5 seconds. But there are so many other benefits that go out with it. I would love if we could ever, stalls are a necessary evil. I mean, if you're at a racetrack where there's 2,000 horses, you're not having them all turned out. If you have a horse that's being handled that way, you just need to know that you've created bad bone, weak bone, if you have even a couple of weeks without speed. And we wonder why there are those breakdowns. It actually is a really simple little thing.
It's gonna keep you on time.
Okay, cool. That's what I'm working on. Thank you, gang.